The final one, if these other ones look bad, this last one is the doozy, our perception. Let me explain what I mean by this. Let's say that you're living back in time in a hunter-gatherer society. Now, as a hunter-gatherer, you're a pretty amazing person. Your ability to survive is remarkable. The level of skill and understanding and your mental acuity, your raw processing power, that Homo sapiens mind of yours has some extraordinary abilities. And so, let's say it's your turn to go out and be the gatherer. You go out, and let's say that there's a local plant that has a high nutritive value. And let's say that that plant has a cousin that looks almost identical, except that cousin plant also has a severe effect on digestion. It's not good. You don't want to eat it. You don't want to have happen what it's going to do to you. And so you have to have the potent ability to distinguish subtle nuances one from another. Now, I speak from a tiny bit of experience, or I should say lack of experience. I remember a Boy Scout trip when I was in Boy Scouts. We did this weekend camp out where that was one of our challenges, our merit badge, or I think it was survival merit badge. We had to identify local edible plants and then actually eat them. Some mistakes were made. There were some negative effects. That's all I will say about that. So these people knew better than I did. And so we have this powerful ability to distinguish subtle nuances from each other. In fact, that's how our brains work. That's how our minds often think. We look at anything and everything, and our mind dials up the contrast and tries to distinguish one subtlety from the other subtlety so that we can draw as much information as possible from everything that we're seeing. Now, let's say that you're in this hunter-gatherer society, and now it's your turn to go out and be the hunter. So you're out in the woods trying to find a meal to bring back to camp, to give sustenance to you, your family, your tribe, your clan, everybody else. They are all relying on you. And so let's say that it's a very quiet, still day, and there's no wind, and as you creep through the woods to find prey, to find food and sustenance, all of a sudden, off to your left, there's the tiniest rustling in the brush. Now, in the amount of detail and nuance that you can see, the billions of bits of information that are right in front of you, literally billion, that your eyes and your mind are distinguishing, interpreting, and making judgments about, that tiny rustle is not significant, but to you, to the human mind, it has to be incredibly significant because you have to notice that tiny bit of information and you have to respond to it instantly because it is a matter of eating or being eaten. It might turn out to be prey for you, or you might turn out to be prey for it. So your mind keys on that subtle variation, makes it huge, makes it powerful. You notice it. Well, why is this significant to us in life drawing? Here's the reason why. Let's take this guy. This is a model that we'll take a look at frequently in this class. A guy I use in my live life drawing classes. Nice guy, interesting guy to draw. A lot of character, and with his cleanly shaven head, we can see some of the visual interest of the forms. And so we look at him and we do what comes naturally and what our mind demands that we do. We parse the complexity. We dial up the contrast, and we notice all of the nuances that make up this guy's character. And so we sit down to draw as accurately as we can and key in on all of those variations that make up his head. And then the chime rings. It's time for a break. And so the model gets up and takes a well-deserved break. You're right on top of your drawing, carefully working inches away from the surface. So now you step back a few paces and you take a look at what you have and are utterly horrified to see that you have drawn something that looks like this. Oh my gosh. Are you guilty of doing this? My experience is that you are, and I am too. Come away with something that is broken up, not cohesive, and frankly horrifying when we have such high hopes of doing a stronger drawing. Well, don't feel too bad in that this is what comes naturally. This is what human beings do. It's the thing that keeps us alive. That is the cognitive ability that lets us successfully navigate our way through life and survive. But in the life drawing classroom, this ability that keeps us alive is the thing that kills us, the thing that absolutely stops us in our tracks. And this is why some artists say that you have to learn to see. This is what they mean by it. You have to not do what comes naturally. You have to train yourself to see your subject in a simple way. You have to find a way to take all of those individual bits of information and make them cohesive, make them structural, make them describe the overall form so that you can come out the other side not with something that's going in this direction, but something that has some cohesiveness, some clarity, and some structure. Now, if I've made this sound difficult, my friends, it is. In fact, it gets even worse because there are just a whole list of pitfalls in the way that we interpret what we see. One other challenge that we have to overcome is this. Along with this thing we've been talking about how we tend to break down and interpret our subject in terms of the whole versus the parts, we also tend to see things symbolically. We have this tendency to want to put everything in a box. We symbolically say, these are eyes, this is a nose, this is a mouth, this is the cheek over here. And it makes sense because, the world is so complex, it has so much information, and so the way that your mind tends to parse all of that complexity is to break it down that way. Even though a cheek doesn't have any definitive spot where it ceases to be a cheek and it starts being a chin or a jaw, we still say, that general area is a cheek. And we tend to see things very symbolically. Children do it. As in this drawing, that's the way they interpret, when they draw, the way they interpret the complexity. And we tend to do the same thing throughout our lives, is to see things in terms of how they're outlined. Now, that's not a bad art form. There are all sorts of beautiful and interesting symbolic types of art. But if our goal is to be more representational from life, then we can't fall into the pitfall of outlining everything. The old masters that we will look at didn't do it. We looked at a painting by Velázquez a moment ago, and we looked at a painting by John Singer Sargent. Those are not outlines, but those are rather shapes of light and shadow, as we'll come to deal with in the class. And so we have such a powerful need and want to draw symbolically that it's tough for many of us to overcome that. So that is yet another challenge that we'll be addressing in the class so that we can representationally work from life. So these are the big four that we'll be addressing over the course of the class. So what will we do to combat that? We will rigorously learn construction drawing. We will rigorously understand the values of light and shadow and how they can be employed to show a sense of three-dimensional volume on our two-dimensional drawing surface. We'll learn to control edges, to use them to our benefit to create the illusion of life and a three-dimensional effect. And we'll also study portrait composition so that our drawings are not just classroom studies, but they actually give an artistic representation and depiction of our subject. Every step of the way, we have to learn to edit. We have to take this complex subject and choose the elements that are going to give clarity and artistry to that subject. That is our process of working from life.